The English Channel, 21 miles of open sea separating a country from a continent.
We used to walk along those beautiful white cliffs very often, look across to France.
For centuries, people had dreamt of a way to connect Britain to her continental neighbour. 25 years ago, they finally achieved that goal.
At the time, it was unique. It was a great piece of work and a necessary investment.
The Channel Tunnel is an engineering triumph, but it would never have been built without the bravery and resolve of an exceptional group of people, the tunnellers.
It was like being in a war with the earth, with the rock, the machinery you were using, with the air you were breathing.
It was also a matter of pride. Teams from Britain and France tunnelled out from the shore, racing to be the first to reach the breakthrough point under the channel.
I was the first one to actually cross that line into France. It can only be done the once. Vive la France!
Today, it's a vital part of our infrastructure, providing a high-speed link to mainland Europe.
We get about 3,000 lorries. For passenger vehicles, it's up to about 10,000 vehicles a day.
The drainage stations, the firefighting, the cooling and the ventilation. It's not just a concrete tube.
Building the longest undersea tunnel in the world was never going to be straightforward. Its construction was blighted by a series of setbacks, including flooding.
The project was on a knife edge. If this is not sorted, this could be the end of the Channel Tunnel.
And fires.
It didn't sort of occur to me how close I was to death.
And financial bust-ups.
The simple fact was that it cost more to build.
And it just took a lot longer than everybody had predicted.
But eventually, through sheer dogged determination, these workers built one of the 7 wonders of the modern world. This train is going on a remarkable journey. 25 miles under the seabed. It's travelling through one of the biggest engineering projects ever undertaken in Britain. It involved not just monumental challenges, but the goodwill of 2 nations, historic enemies who'd need to work closely together if it was to succeed. From the beginning, it was an ambitious plan. Britain and France would dig out from either side of the coast, vying to be the first to reach the breakthrough point under the channel. Along the white cliffs of Dover, at the base of Shakespeare's Cliff, workers and machines were assembled. Then, in January 1987, work began on building the Channel Tunnel.
We zip through it now, and we forget probably about the massive number of people involved in this project who have toiled, under the sea for years to get this thing working.
The Channel Tunnel didn't just involve building 1 tunnel, but 3. 2 tunnels would run either side of a smaller service tunnel in the middle, forming a new gateway to Europe. The Channel Tunnel would take more than 5 years to build and over 1 million tons of concrete. Specially designed machines known as TBMs, subterranean Goliaths, could bore the tunnel at a rate of 5 meters an hour.
It's awe-inspiring. It's like a monster. That's just, you can't stop it. Obviously you can, but it's just like a monster, just eating the earth and just spewing it out the other end.
Keeping this monster moving forward were 2 dedicated teams of men and women who worked day and night to ensure the tunnel's success.
To me, it was an amazing engineering feat to be involved in.
Yeah, I look back at it and think it was an incredible project to be part of. I say to people, I worked on the Channel Tunnel, and you feel like you've built it. I feel like I've built the Channel Tunnel.
I look back on our time with pride. You know, we've done a good job. We've done it in fair time as well.
Before the Channel Tunnel was built, if you wanted to get to France, the only cost-effective way was by ferry. Sailing across the English Channel could be unpredictable. Ferry crossings were often plagued with bad weather.
You had to endure the problems of seasickness, perhaps, of fog in the channel, which is not infrequent.
I don't like ferries because I think there's too much waiting around in queues.
Ever since I got caught in a storm on a ferry on the crossing of the channel, I haven't used the ferries since.
It wasn't just passengers who were at the mercy of the elements. Delays were bad for business. A faster, more efficient way to cross the channel was desperately needed. The first modern attempt to build a rail tunnel under the channel began in 1974.
In the 1974 dig, we were all going happily along, and then there was a change of government. And then suddenly we was looking at redundancy.
It turned out to be a false start. The Labour government decided the Channel Tunnel was too expensive and cancelled the project. For a decade, it was forgotten about. Then, in 1984, the most unlikely of allies got together to resurrect the idea. Britain's Conservative Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher and Socialist French President François Mitterrand announced they'd agreed to build a physical link between their two countries. But not everyone was happy.
We were one of the main players there, being Sea-Link, and we operated a number of ships on that route, and I was, of course, envisioning the ferry service would lose out if the Channel Tunnel was built. So the ferry companies joined forces in an attempt to kill off the Channel Tunnel to protect their businesses.
They launched a blistering anti-tunnel campaign. Its slogan, "Keep Britain an Island," struck a chord with some. Then, full-page newspaper ads played on fears that the taxpayer would end up paying for a white elephant. But Mrs. Thatcher had an answer to that. The project would be privately funded.
She had an ideological position. It was that private's good, public's bad. And that was her very clear view.
With the backing of both leaders, the project was back on. Many people expected they'd simply carry on digging the tunnel that had been abandoned in 1974.
The idea of just reviving the old plan was rather anathema to the government at the time, which wanted something exciting and daring.
The words excitement and railway tunnel just didn't seem to go together. It was also well known that Mrs. Thatcher wasn't a fan of the railways.
She never travelled on them. I suppose that was a good indication.
She was anti-train, but she was very, very pro this project.
There were several companies bidding for this historic deal, and they were all keen to come up with a plan that Mrs. Thatcher would favour. There were futuristic plans for road bridges and drive-through tunnels with hotels and marinas in the middle of the channel. There was even a scheme to build a motorway housed in a tube, suspended in mid-air. But for all these grandiose ideas, there could only be one winner. And it wasn't who everyone expected. The Channel Tunnel is an amazing engineering achievement, but the design we see today was never the favourite to get the go-ahead.
There were all sorts of ideas about how to get across the channel or underneath it. There was a lengthy debate, and various construction companies came forward with different plans.
April 1985. Companies were invited to submit proposals. There were 4 main schemes. The one thing most of them had in common was the ability to get in a car and drive to France. Eurobridge proposed a double-decker drive-through motorway housed inside a tube suspended from a bridge. Then a train tunnel would run beneath the seabed.
Eurobridge, uncosted, pushing the limits of technology. Nobody really thought that they'll be able to finance it.
The boss of Sea-Link Ferries also put in a bid. Called Channel Expressway, it was a mix of road and rail. 2 large tunnels would carry both trains and vehicles.
We thought the ideal tunnel would be a drive-through. 20 minutes and you drive your car or your lorry through to the other side.
To get rid of the exhaust fumes, you'd have had to build ventilation shafts in one of the busiest waterways in the world, where also there's a lot of fog and an awful lot of shipping. It becomes a huge risk.
The third bid, called Euroroute, featured a tunnel between artificial islands approached by bridges. It boasted that you could drive all the way to the continent.
Of course, this was a terrible idea. I mean, think of all those ships sailing past that could easily hit those islands. It looks like something out of a sci-fi novel, even now.
Lastly, the Channel Tunnel Group's proposal was the only one not to feature a road. Cars and lorries would drive onto specially constructed railway wagons, while foot passengers could climb aboard a high-speed train. With the entire project privately funded, the banks were keen to back the most reassuringly straightforward plan.
The Channel Tunnel Group won, I think, because if the banks were going to put a lot of money, the initial loan was £5 billion, they wanted reasonable assurance that this was going to be built on time and to budget or somewhere near it.
February 1986. The design for a rail tunnel had been agreed, and Mrs. Thatcher and President Mitterrand signed a formal treaty. But not everyone thought it was a good idea.
There were definitely some, very British types who didn't want us to have this fixed link, and apparently some even kind of pelted Mitterrand's car with eggs. Some of them chanted "Froggy, froggy, froggy, out, out, out."
Opposition to the tunnel brought to the fore some bigger questions about the country as a whole.
Is Britain European? Do we want to be connected with Europe, or do we want to be the single island on our own? So that nationalism is very important, and it divided the nation. It divided its nation about a tunnel.
Despite the protests, the project got the go-ahead. December 1986. The first question: where exactly to start digging this tunnel? Geologists had found a layer of rock they thought would be ideal. Called chalk marl, it appeared to stretch from one side of the channel all the way to the other.
Chalk marl is almost impervious to water, so it makes excellent material for the tunnel boring machine to tunnel through.
Impermeable chalk marl is a soft rock, perfect for tunnelling underwater. But there was a drawback. Its path beneath the English Channel was narrow and undulating, making it difficult to follow. This meant a straight and level tunnel underneath the channel wouldn't be possible. Instead, the 3 tunnels would have to rise and fall, following the route of the chalk marl seam. The challenge for the engineers was making sure the passenger didn't feel like they were on a roller coaster. To smooth the route, many different disciplines, from geologists to tunnellers, worked together. The conditions for the 13,000-strong workforce were demanding, so they needed a good reason to turn up for work every day.
Why do you do it?
Money. I left an office job in 1985, and my take-home pay was £404 a month. Channel Tunnel. The second year, 1990, I earned £58,000.
John Gallagher was just 18 years old and living in Donegal when he was attracted by the cash on offer across the Irish Sea.
When I finished school, I came to do the Channel Tunnel. My uncle worked as a pit boss there, and the rest is history.
The Channel Tunnel's going to kick off. It's got permission. The project's going to be the biggest one in the world. And I thought, I want to go on that, I'll make some money.
The British were full of confidence. They soon bonded and came up with a name for themselves, the Tunnel Tigers.
People make their mark on history, but I think the project put its mark on people as well. And that's what I did. I branded myself. So I come up with this design of a tiger, Tunnel Tiger, and that's it there.
December 1987. And the race between the Tunnel Tigers and the French was hotting up. This incredible feat of engineering captured the nation's imagination. Back in the 1980s, the science and technology program Tomorrow's World broadcast live from the tunnel. Updating the audience on its progress was presenter Judith Hahn.
The British and French tunnels are approaching each other at over 400 metres a week. The 80s were a really exciting time for science and technology, which was perfect for Tomorrow's World. We had the shuttle, we had Concorde, and of course we had the tunnel, which was a really marvellous project.
February 1988. The tunneler's secret weapon, the tunnel boring machine, known as a TBM, was hard at work slicing through the rock face.
This spot I'm standing on at noon today was solid rock. Now the cutting face is just 15 metres beyond this section here.
There were 11 of these snaking monsters excavating the 3 tunnels. They contained workshops, restrooms, and even a first aid station.
To drive one of these things, it's big, heavy, long, and dangerous.
Weighing in at around 760 tons, they were 250 meters in length, the size of 2 football pitches. Designed specifically for digging the Channel Tunnel, they were central to the operation. At the front was the 7.5 meter wide cutting blade. It could gnaw its way through solid rock, but the way the TBM worked was remarkably simple.
So we take the plastic tube as a TBM, and the TBM advances into the material, and as it goes forward, we remove the cut material from the back of the machine, advance and remove more material. And that is the basic tunnelling technique, and it doesn't change. It is always the same.
As the tunnel boring machine cut through the chalk marl, it exposed fresh segments of chalk. These were lined with concrete sections and fixed in place with cement, forming a watertight ring of concrete. A conveyor belt carried the debris away from the cutting head. Hydraulic jacks would then push the cutting head forward. The most important job was making sure these Goliaths didn't stray off course.
Driving the machine, steering it, it could be actually quite stressful when it was going offline and it wouldn't come back.
They don't forgive you. You do something wrong on a TBM, you will suffer.
The tunnellers had to work safely and quickly. How much money they could earn depended on how many concrete rings they could erect to line the tunnel wall.
There was a huge carrot dangled in front of you called bonus. And if you had a bad day and you didn't earn bonus, there were some long faces.
As the British thought they'd be following an easier, water-free route, it was decided they'd tunnel a bit further. The midpoint, known as Point M, would see the British digging about 14 miles and the French around 10 miles.
Point M was a point that actually wasn't quite in the middle, but almost in the middle, a bit on the French side. That was the one they were both aiming at to bring the two tunnels together.
The British expected the route to this point to be dry, so they gambled on tunnel boring machines that weren't waterproof. The French already knew they'd meet wet ground, and so had opted for TBMs that were completely waterproof.
On the UK side, God was probably British. It was easy to stay in that layer. That means they had normally no problem of water. On the French side, due to the folding of the ground, we were obliged to create a new type of tunneling boring machines.
These waterproof French TBMs were 25% slower than their less complicated British rivals, but if they hit water, they could keep going. The British were taking a calculated risk. To establish if the path ahead was dry, geologists continually probed the tunnel face, measuring the moisture content of the chalk marl. Geologist Helen Natras was in the cab of the TBM when they hit a problem. A jet of water was gushing out of the tunnel face.
So I jump out. So what is it? What is it? He goes, it's coming out of the end of the drill string, Helen. I thought, oh my goodness, what are we going to do? And then the miners were all going, oh, we're going to get flooded.
So everybody thought, that's it, it's flooding.
The only way for Helen to assess the seriousness of the problem was to measure the amount of water flowing from the leak.
We need to take a measure of how much water's coming out. So we had our bucket, and he holds it up, and the water's coming out so quickly it just bounces out.
So Helen came up with a novel way to capture the water so it could be measured.
We're going to use your plastic trousers. Get your plastic trousers off. So he gets his plastic trousers off, and then we managed to get the water in a more controlled fashion into the bucket.
There were only two places it could be coming from.
I used my initiative and actually tasted it, and it wasn't salty. So we knew it wasn't coming from the English Channel.
It was rainwater that filtered through, and it was trapped within the middle chalk, and that was filtering through the fault lines into the tunnel.
Thankfully, this was a small leak, easily contained, but it was a warning sign. Small pockets of rainwater were trapped in ancient layers of rock. No one knew if much larger pools of water lay ahead. This project wasn't just about building a tunnel. Above ground, engineers were debating what kind of trains should run through it. They needed shuttle wagons capable of loading and unloading articulated lorries. For passenger vehicles, there had to be two types of wagon, single-deckers for coaches and double-deckers for cars. These wagons would be the largest of their kind anywhere in the world. For foot passengers, France had been operating high-speed TGV services since 1981, and so this type of train was the clear favourite.
The TGV, which actually means the Train Grand Vitesse, the high-speed train, is a record breaker. You know, it held world records for the fastest train in the world for many, many years.
Compared to Britain's dirty diesels, and even our fastest train, the Intercity 125, French TGV technology was way ahead of its rivals.
The Eurostar trains looked futuristic in a way that
British Railways, most of British Railway stock didn't. You still at that time had your flat-fronted, yellow-painted, slam-door passenger stock. And these looked like something out of the 21st century.
What made these Eurostar trains stand out was their speed. 100 miles per hour in the tunnel and over 180 miles per hour through the French countryside. As the UK's twisting tracks were designed in the days of steam, these high-speed trains were forced to slow down when they reached Britain. Getting one train to run on two different systems wasn't easy.
The UK's railway system is so old, it was the first in the world. Many of the lines were actually built to accommodate much smaller locomotives and carriages. So this high-speed train had to be narrower so that it would fit within the British Railways southern system.
Designing the train was only the beginning. The route it would take through the Kent countryside to the tunnel head at Folkestone was still to be decided. But it wasn't that controversy that threatened to derail the project. Fears were mounting that the tunnel might bring a deadly disease to Britain. The Channel Tunnel was the largest underwater construction project the world had ever seen. Teams from Britain and France would tunnel their way to a breakthrough point deep under the sea.
Well, this, of course, was a massive, massive project between two massive teams. And suddenly we had collaboration on a truly epic scale. It was something unbelievable to many of us when it first opened up, and it is to me now.
The tunnellers on both sides were focused on sticking to their demanding schedule. This was a 24/7 operation, so the men were housed in temporary accommodation on land close to the tunnel entrance. This was home to electrician Kevin Milne. Back then, prefabricated huts housed over 1,000 workers. There's not much to see today, but the memories are still vivid.
My home for 3.5 years in the 80s, 90s. A lot of memories already, looking at the place. I look around, my block was just here on the right, D3. I think it was the second tier up, that direction a bit. And I look at it now, 30 years later, and it's a weird feeling, obviously, but it's like looking at an ancient monument. Like, you know, you see people go to Stonehenge and they go to these ancient barrows from our ancestors, and I look at this and it's a monument to the guys who worked on the tunnel and who lived here. Amazing. Sorry.
The bonds forged between the men who lived and worked here were strong.
Happy memories, sad memories, a lot of laughter, a lot of tears. A lot of great guys, some comedians, some characters you wouldn't believe that existed in this world. Hard-working men.
I didn't stay anywhere else. It was that good. And I went to have a look at digs in Dover. I've seen better pigeon lofts.
Like to work hard, like to play hard. All good pals.
The tunnellers had to rely on each other because this was one of the most demanding and dangerous workplaces in the world.
You had your shift to do, you had your target to reach, you had your pit bosses who are strict enough. It's just hard work.
We didn't have a lunch break, we just kept going. You worked. You grab a cup of coffee and a sandwich when you could.
Hot, claustrophobic, you name it. It's not a place where somebody who doesn't know what they're doing should be anywhere near.
While the tunnel tigers pushed on with their punishing schedule of 3 8-hour shifts a day, above ground there was a new danger. A fear that the tunnel could allow a terrifying disease to reach Britain. rabies. It's a rare but serious infection that can be transmitted by animal bites and is especially common in foxes. Symptoms include frothing at the mouth and paralysis. Was the tunnel about to fast-track the disease to Britain?
A lot had been done firing vaccine pellets at foxes from helicopters, putting down bait, which included the vaccine. Outside, around the terminal sites, there'll be high security fencing. And that's not just to keep out people, but also animals, another matter of public concern.
The problem was taken so seriously that a replica of the tunnel was built to test ways of deterring animals from coming through it.
This is what they came up with, this electrified grid. It works on the principle of an electric cattle fence. It gives a shock, which is not enough to seriously hurt an animal, but enough to warn it off.
I think they were paranoid about rabies, paranoid about foxes.
The fears were unfounded. In 25 years, not a single rabid animal has come through the tunnel. March 1988. The tunnellers were making good progress, but the schedule was relentless. Living and working for long periods away from home took its toll on the tunnellers and their families.
All the phone boxes, green, I remember them all, one after the other, and guys would be arguing with their wives and smashing their handset off the box, and just all their emotions pouring out in the telephone box. 12 people all having arguments with wives, other people telling their wives how much they loved them, talking to their kids, and everybody's life was just laid out in front of you while you waited for your turn.
I've got a wee girl just now and one due maybe even tonight.
Really?
Yeah. She's due just shortly.
That's nerve-wracking for you, isn't it?
Yeah, it's and a half.
As the tunnel progressed, just getting people to and from work every day was a major challenge.
Here we have an old TML man rider, and these were going in and out on a regular basis, carrying personnel who'd finished their shift and personnel who were starting their shift. This material was added for a very good reason. It's a safety measure. I've spent many an hour dozing as we went in and out. We weren't supposed to, but if you're tired and it's a long journey, you're bound to just nod off a little bit, and you could go arm out, leg out, and before you know it, you've got an injury, a serious injury. So that's why these were added. Good little machines. We used to look forward to seeing them come in, and we used to look forward to seeing them go out. But yeah, it's good to see one again after all these years.
There were 183 locomotives running on over 150 miles of track. With no form of signalling, the potential for chaos on such a crowded system was considerable, especially as this railway never slept. At the peak of production, they carried 2,000 tons of newly mined chalk back to the surface 24 hours a day, every day. For the workers riding these locomotives, it could take hours to get to and from this underwater construction site. Boredom could easily set in, and alcohol and cigarettes were banned. But some tunnellers found ingenious ways to buck the system.
I saw him go in his locker and he got a big juicy grapefruit out, put it on the bench next to him. Thought, that's what he's having for his lunch. No sandwiches, and then I saw him look around like that, like a secret agent, looking over his shoulder, and then he went in his locker and he got a syringe out, and I thought, oh my God, he's going to jack up with some sort of drugs, heroin or something. And then the next minute he gets a little half bottle of vodka and he sucks the vodka up into the syringe and he injects it into his grapefruit. So he had obviously had a lovely tea break. 4 hours later, the nice vodka grapefruit cocktail.
Guys did smoke. Like, they used to hide their cigarettes in spirit levels and stuff like that to get them past the security. Rules were broken all the time, but I didn't break any.
There were 1,100 British workers underground, and the vast majority were men.
There are one or two that have died in the wall tunnellers who actually don't make women down here.
Yeah, but we win them over. We show we muck in with the guys, we get covered in mud, that sort of thing, they accept us.
A chance phone call from a colleague attracted engineer Sarah Chapman to the project.
We need some more engineers on the Channel Tunnel. It's a temporary job, but it might lead to a permanent job. Are you interested?
Before long, Sarah was underground with a crucial role to play.
It was really making sure that the tunnel went in the right direction, that it was big enough, that it wasn't tilting forward, left, right, top, bottom sort of thing.
Sarah was one of only a handful of women working underground.
There were no toilet facilities down the tunnels. You've got to allow what often was about an hour to get in, an hour to get out. So there's sort of 10 hours where you actually don't have access to a toilet. That was fairly difficult. And I do remember actually raising that issue and was pretty much laughed at and told, well, you want to work here, you want to be one of the men, just deal with it, get on with it.
Some tunnellers had bizarre reasons for believing this was no place for a woman.
And you wouldn't want a lady on your ship?
I don't think so. No. I think I'm a little bit like the old, perhaps the easiest way of getting out of it is to say I've inherited a little bit from the Japanese, having worked with them for a while. They believe that the underground god is in fact a goddess, and to have a pretty young lady down the tunnel would possibly offend the goddess, and therefore the water in the face would come in.
As a female, there were times when it was quite difficult, and I'm sure the other females on the job felt the same, and that we've made huge leaps forward, although there are still not that many female engineers in all sorts of engineering.
Sarah would spend over a year working underground, ensuring the path of the tunnel remained on course. The dangers of digging underwater have been known to Anglo-French tunnellers for a very long time. The first person to successfully tunnel under a river was a Frenchman. His name was Marc Brunel, and he did it here, in London, on the banks of the River Thames.
Marc Brunel, father of our most famous engineer, Isambard Kingdom Brunel, actually built this huge chamber above the ground and sunk it. So this is 50 feet in diameter. It's about 1,000 tons in weight. It was built on an iron ring, and it is, in effect, a massive pastry cutter.
The whole shaft gradually sank under its own weight, slicing through the soft ground. From this shaft, a tunnel was dug underneath the Thames, beginning in 1825. Marc Brunel's genius was to come up with a revolutionary system he called a tunnelling shield. Individual cages big enough for one man to work in, a primitive version of the tunnel boring machine.
In each cage, each man or tunneler has a wall of planks, and they're held in place by metal poles. And each man in each cage takes out the top two poles, takes out the plank, digs to 4 inches, which is about the size of a brick, replaces the plank, replaces the poles, takes out the one below, digs to 4 inches, replaces the plank, replaces the poles. So it's incredibly laborious.
It's also dangerous, as the tunnel flooded many times. Eventually, it was completed 18 years after it was begun.
This is not just the first tunnel under a river anywhere in the world. This is the birthplace of the underground. This is the tunnel that changed the shape of our cities and changed the shape of our lives.
The Channel Tunnel had similar grand ambitions, but it also faced the same problems that Brunel had encountered. March 1988, and the British tunnellers hit the one thing no one wants to find when digging under the sea: water. This time it was pouring in. If they couldn't stem the leak, the project faced disaster. March 1988. Surprisingly, for a project of this size, it was on schedule and making good progress. But that success brought with it a huge problem. Where to put the 4.9 million cubic meters of rock and earth removed from the tunnel? The stuff tunnellers call spoil. On the flat French shoreline, space wasn't an issue. But 50-metre cliffs on the Kent coast meant land was at a premium.
There's lots of ideas about where to put the spoil from the Channel Tunnel. In fact, there's about 70 different options given, from filling in quarries in north of Kent into kind of filling in valleys on the edge of Dover.
There were concerns that giant slag heaps would scar the picturesque Kent countryside.
I can remember getting into an argument with the man who was in charge of the tunnel because they were taking all the waste out and dumping it. And one of my arguments at the time, where are you dumping all your rubbish?
There was a big question of the spoil disposal, where all the material would go, and lots of studies were done with environmental groups to make sure that it had as limited environmental impact as possible.
The solution was as ingenious as it was simple.
It was decided the best option was to put it at the bottom of the White Cliffs of Dover here. And the advantage of it was there was no lorry movements of chalk mile anywhere around Kent. You can imagine if 4.9 million cubic metres shifted by lorry, it would have been a huge disturbance to the local communities.
To avoid this problem, an artificial lagoon was constructed at the tunnel entrance to hold the spoil. The wall of the lagoon contained 32,000 tons of steel, the largest sheet steel structure ever built. And once all the spoil had settled and dried, Britain had grown by 86 acres. Today, the area is a nature reserve called Samphire Hoe, a new part of Britain where you'd never guess the ground beneath your feet came from deep under the sea.
Even I find it difficult to believe, really, that it was a massive industrial work site. But you look at it now and you think, wow, that's a huge change. The vegetation has grown so much that we can have sheep and cows grazing it, and the number of plants has increased enormously. It's an amazing story.
But this story looked like it might have a very different ending. In March 1988, the British tunnellers hit the one thing they feared most.
We got down there and it was literally like Niagara Falls. It was coming in round about 300 to 400 litres per minute.
They'd gambled on a dry run, but it hadn't paid off. Thousands of litres of water were flooding the tunnel on the British side. In places, it was coming in with the force of a fire hose.
It was just an ongoing battle trying to pump the water out as it was coming in.
It was very wet and it was horrendous, terrible.
The water was coming in quite badly. It was like a car wash in places.
Then, a crack started to appear in the tunnel roof.
So you then have bits falling out of the ceiling with guys trying to work underneath, trying to put in these concrete segments waist high in water and mud and slurry. And so, yeah, that was pretty dangerous.
If the leak couldn't be stopped, they risked the tunnel collapsing. The British needed a solution, and they needed it fast.
It's every main has an ache, mate, to hit water.
We were scratching our heads. Why should it be like that?
But you think, nah, this won't collapse.
If this is not sorted, this could be the end of the Channel Tunnel.
Next time, a grand opening with a royal delay.
One of the papers called it a royal cock-up.
An engineering first.
It was like being inside a cathedral. Absolutely huge.
That was exciting because nothing like that had been done before.
And a catastrophic fire.
If we'd have been in there probably